All right, welcome back, you guys. Yeah, I'm still here, just barely. Several of you saw my post on the community page. Where I was a little whining a little bit. I'll admit that. I get frustrated. I put a lot of work in teaching solid information, and my prayer is just that people would get it and acknowledge the day. I'm not looking for a pat on the back or anything like that. Sometimes a thumbs up or maybe sharing the video that would help you guys. You know, I don't have hardly anybody donating, two to be exact, each month. And so it is a little bit financial frustration. But the major part of it is okay, so you don't donate. At least a thumbs up or a thumbs down would do something on this channel. Commenting would do something. And so it's quite frustrating when I put out all this solid information and I can't even get a thumbs up. And so it's discouraging. And you know, it's hard to live on $800 a month. Okay. Um, so it's very tempting for me to go do something where that I like, being on the ocean, fishing, that kind of thing, opportunity to go work on my uncle's boat. And by the way, my mother is sandbagging that idea. She's not for that. She would rather me be doing this. So she is many of you, she's in your corner. She is not helping me at all to go offshore because I'd be gone 3-4 weeks at a time doing that. So, I've been mulling that around. What am I going to do if this doesn't work out? Right. So, first of all, I apologize if I scared people. I've been doing this since 2009, and I'm pretty much here. I just wish people would like and share and get the information. So, I've been praying here recently. If you don't send me a witness, somebody to help, somebody that can confirm what I'm bringing, I'm gonna go fishing. and just like that, here we are, where everyone is celebrating Shavuot today. I get this video that comes up from somebody I don't know. I'm pretty sure he doesn't watch my information, so it's not like it's somebody who is taking my information and agreeing with it. Okay, that's fine. I would love that to have people that say, "Oh yeah, I could see that. I agree with that." That's a different kind of witness. This witness is somebody who came from out of left field doing his own research and ended up in this same place I am. That's an independent verification. Okay, that's not somebody affirming my research. Okay, so I want to introduce you to a very amazing brother. Again, I don't know him. I just kind of found him and then found, oh wow, he's come out of Orthodox Judaism and he's trying to find his way. Oh, by the way, he's being persecuted by his peers. Saw on his Facebook page, Rabbi Aaron Reuven is just dogging him out because he's a heretic, right? Because he suggests that what the rabbis are doing is erroneous, right? Surprise. Yeah, they're going to do that to you. Anyway, I found this brother and it was encouraging. Very encouraging to me because he's not completely there, but I must say, with his own calculations, he's within 4 days of the actual Shavuot. And he got there through the Holy Spirit, you guys. So please take an opportunity right now just to listen to this young man find his way on this very topic. He's going to do a couple of things. He's going to confirm some things I've already told you. He's also going to bring a little bit of information that I didn't even know. I didn't even realize at the time. But now having that puzzle piece and putting it together here, it makes sense. It makes sense. So I'm thankful for this brother. Israel Horowitz is his name. He's a young man. Again, I think he's come out of Orthodox Judaism and I think he's a Karaite now. So he's like Nehemiah Gordon. He hasn't found the Messiah, but he is on to the rabbinic shenanigans. Okay, that's what's important. So let me present to you Israel Horowitz, who was a YouTuber. Solid person here. Take note, you guys, to what he says right off the beginning. He's not keeping Shavuot this year like the rabbis. This is the first year he's not. I find that fascinating.
Going strong. Are we going strong? No? Says I'm live. Are we going? All right, we're live. Once again, here we are. Guys, for any of you that know anything about Judaism, you will know that tonight is the celebration of Shavuot, the festival of the harvest. And although I usually actually follow the rabbinic calendar for the festivals at this time in my life, for this holiday, I'm going to have to sit it out and not join the rabbinics while they practice this holiday of Shavuot. And I'm going to give you the reason here tonight. I think that they've deviated from the path way too much. I think that they're way off track with what Shavuot is. And we will absolutely make that clear. Stephen's saying it doesn't seem like the harvest time. And you're actually correct. By actual standards, the harvest is only beginning right now. So let's get started, because the easier part of this is to talk about what Shavuot is not. And Shavuot is not what the rabbis say it is. Okay, according to the rabbis, you begin counting the Omer. The Omer is a 7-week count. You begin counting it from the day after the first day of Passover. You count it for 7 weeks. During the counting of the Omer, you must every single day state with your own words, today is the first day of the Omer, and today is the second day of the Omer. And they say the first day that is of the 7 weeks, and then they have a whole extravagant way of even pronouncing it every single day. And in typical rabbinic fashion, they take what is a general commandment about counting, and they go and they enunciate every single day what day it is. But what do they do during the Omer? The Omer, which...
All right, so let me just stay right here. First of all, he's not pointing this out. He's just stating some facts here. But the rabbis actually incorporated this thing of counting the omer, the measurement of an omer. It doesn't say anywhere in the text to do that. Actually, we're supposed to be waving a sheaf of barley. What he's not saying here is that the rabbis eventually became completely devoid of any agriculture or temple practice at all. It was because they were in diaspora. And so they came up with something new. He's about to establish something I didn't know. I know on the other side of the count, there is 3 weeks of mourning, and then the 9 days leading up to when the destruction of the temple is. That is a time of mourning all the way through there. But what he's about to tell you is kind of shocking to me. I didn't realize this. Listen to what he says.
In the Torah actually is a celebration period where the harvest has begun. What they do during the Omer is they mourn. They have a mourning period. And what do they mourn?
I did not realize this. I didn't realize, and he's right. I went and checked it out. Under Rabbi Akiva, which is more than 1,000 years, more than 100 years after Yeshua. This is during the Bar Kokhba revolt. Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 students, and it was like it seems, because he was the one that instigated the Bar Kokhba thing with Simon Bar Kokhba. It seems like he was trying to bring back the old ways with the temple and all that, and eventually in the 300s we see that again, where a third temple they tried to rebuild it, and the fire came from the earth and stopped them. That's a whole nother story. But this guy emerges about 100 and something, 130 years after Yeshua, right? They have completely lost everything. There's no temple, and so they start doing new traditions based on this rabbi he's talking about, Akiva. Okay, this is where they start honoring what happened. All right, so counting the Omer is one thing, but honoring a dead rabbi and all his students many years later, that's not in the Torah either, you guys. That was something incorporated by the Jews into the Talmud and something they observed. I didn't realize that when they count the Omer, they're actually mourning. So they're mourning on both sides of this. Basically, it's the whole feast season, which makes sense to me now, because Amos, right? What does it say in Amos? Yah tells them, I'm going to turn your feasts into mourning. Uh, that's revelation to me, because he's establishing they do that through the whole period, not just on the other side.
They're mourning for the dead students of Rabbi Akiva. Now, anyone who doesn't know about Rabbi Akiva, I'll give you a little quick rundown. Rabbi Akiva is the greatest rabbi of the Talmud. He is considered to be the godfather of all the rabbis. And what is his story? Well, he was an ignoramus, around 40 years old, never learned the Torah. And this is the good part of the story, kind of sweet. He's walking around. He was a shepherd, I believe, and he sees a stream that is pounding a rock, and he sees the water dripping on the rock over and over again. And he sees that there's actually a crevice in the rock that was torn out or carved out because of the persistent water on the rock. And so he said, if the water can penetrate the rock, then the Torah can penetrate an ignorant fool like me. And so Rabbi Akiva says, I'm going to go learn Torah. Now, instead of picking up the Torah and reading it, or figuring out a way to organize a session with someone who knew the Torah in his district or in his hometown, he left to yeshiva. Thus begins the journey of Yeshiva Akiva. And he goes out to yeshiva and leaves his wife for a period of 12 years. Now, anyone who's read the Torah knows it does not take 12 years to read the Torah. Definitely don't have to leave your wife in order to read the Torah either. But Rabbi Akiva had to do just that. And so after he left his wife for 12 years, he came back 12 years later, an accomplished Torah scholar. And as he gets close to the door, he hears his wife talking to her friend through the window. And the friend says to his wife, isn't it terrible that your husband was gone for 12 years? And the wife says, if I had the choice, I would tell Akiva to go for another 12 years. I don't even need him to be here with me. It's okay. Let him go for another 12 years. And so Akiva did not even enter the door and tell his wife that he was there. He turned around and went back for another 12 years. So after 24 years, he returns with 24,000 students. So apparently these students don't have lives of their own. They're just following their Rebbe around, 24,000 of them. And here they are returning, and Akiva is now the king of the rabbis. But the story is not over, because all 24,000 of those students die in a 7-week period. The Talmud says that these students died because they didn't treat each other with enough respect. Apparently, that was the plague came and wiped them out, 24,000 of them. Historically, it's probably more accurate to point out that these 24,000 may have been people, students that died in the Bar Kokhba revolt. The Bar Kokhba revolt was a situation where Rabbi Akiva supported a man named Bar Kokhba, who he claimed was the Messiah, and Bar Kokhba had a disastrous failure in war, and they all died. So probably historically that's really the 24,000 death cause. But let's just take the Talmudic narrative, because they're speaking.
Notice how the Talmud likes to record that it was an inner thing, that they died because they were mean to each other from a plague, but historically is a different story. You see how they flipped the script there. They don't want to face the truth and what really happened. And I see the same thing on the other side of the account with 3 weeks of mourning, or 21 days of mourning, and then the 9 days leading up to the destruction of the temple. They don't want to talk about, well, we moved that day. You can't find a smoking gun that they say, let's move Shavuot. No, you just see them talking and debating about lessening of joy during the month of Av. And then it eventually it morphs to absolutely nothing done in joyful in the month of Av. No marriages, no nothing, no taking baths, no all kinds of things. You're mourning in that time, not joyful.
For themselves, these people all died, and so now we're going to spend 7 weeks that are supposed to be a celebration of the harvest. We're supposed to spend that in mourning. And what does it look like when you're mourning? You cannot listen to music. You cannot get haircuts. You cannot have weddings. So it turns out now the rabbis are making people refrain from getting married, making people refrain from listening to music and grooming themselves, because we have to mourn right now for the students of Rabbi Akiva who died. Ironically, there's one day in middle of the the Omer period in the middle of the 7 weeks, that according to everyone is a day of celebration where we take a break from all of the mourning. And that day is Lag BaOmer. They claim that's the day that for one day the students stopped dying. And what else happened on Lag BaOmer? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai died. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was also one of the great rabbis of that time. Shimon Bar Yochai is known to have written the Zohar, which is the mystical Kabbalah book that the occultists of Judaism follow. Ironically, the Zohar was mysteriously only found about 300 years ago, yet they claim that the Zohar goes all the way back 2,000 years ago to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And they have a whole celebration, and they sing about him, and they're like talking, oh, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and they make bonfires for his eternal fire that shall burn forever. And they go and have a pilgrimage festival to his grave and worship at his grave, and break Torah commandments by inquiring of the dead. And it's all really one big disaster. But as you can recognize, this has absolutely nothing to do with the Torah. Yet this becomes the defining factor of the Omer in rabbinic Judaism, a mourning period that has absolutely nothing to do with the Torah and everything to do with rabbinic ego and rabbinic history. Now, when the period of mourning finally finishes, they then have the festival of the giving of the Torah, in which they say that Shavuot is the day that God gave the Torah. And so they correlate that with the...
And this is true, you guys, with the correct count, overlaid with the grain, and then with the text, we can see that the giving of the Torah is not when Yah comes down and he gives them the 10 commandments. That is not the giving of the Torah. The Torah in full is when Moses comes down with the 2 tablets. That is much later in the chapters, and is also when they've defiled that day. Aaron says, tomorrow is a feast unto Yah, right? It was Shavuot at that time. That is the correct harvest day, beginning of the harvest for Shavuot. All right.
Revelation at Sinai, and they say that this was the day historically when the revelation at Sinai took place. The thing is, again, textually, they have no evidence for this because
because where they're marking it, it does not. We're given days, and thank Yah for giving us the benchmark of time in those texts. Otherwise, we would be completely lost. We would be like a compass without any of the face, any of the directions. We just have an arrow that pointed, right? We wouldn't be able to see the degrees that we were off, right? So he gave us benchmarks. They left on the 15th day. They arrived on the same day that right? So we can see a monthly tick in time of the 15th day. That's what he's talking about in this particular scripture. Chapter 19, it's been 3 months. And by the time they get to the place, it's over 50 days, you guys. It's over 50 days. It's more like 63 days by the time what he's talking about in that text. It does not fit what the rabbis say. And incidentally, this is where the Christians come right behind the rabbis many hundreds years later with the Pentecost thing. And actually, because they didn't understand either the significance of what that day was according to the grain. Error upon error. They built on a foundation of error and come away with what? Error. When you start with error, you're not going to miraculously turn that into truth. No, you're going to end with error.
It says in the Torah, this is in Exodus chapter 19, it says that the Israelites arrived on the 3rd month, and then on the 3rd day, God gave them the Torah, the 10 commandments.
All right, so they arrived on the 15th, 3 days later, because they had to wash themselves, right? Yah told Moses, tell the people to wash themselves, wash their clothes. I'm going to come give them a talk. I'm going to talk to them personally, right?
Right?
That's 63 days.
It doesn't say that it was given on the 6th of Sivan, the 6th day, which is when the rabbis are celebrating Shavuot. By the way, they celebrate the 6th and 7th day, of course, because they celebrate all of the holidays 2 days, which is also wrong because in the Torah, the holidays are only 1 day. So basically, they're doing everything wrong as they sit here and celebrate the festival of the giving of the Torah, even though that's actually not at all what the Torah calls this holiday. It's not a celebration of the giving of the Torah. And based off of the dates given in the Torah, there's absolutely zero textual evidence to say that this was the day that the Torah was given. It was given in this month, but not on this day. There's no evidence for that. In fact, the evidence implies otherwise.
No. What he's saying in this month, Yah gave them verbally the 10 Commandments. The 2 tablets came down much later. And I think if I can have a conversation with Israel and show him the layout, the timeline that I found, I think he'll agree with that, you guys. This guy is just now waking up and finding this himself. This is profound to me. Okay? This is exactly what I prayed for. That Yah would send somebody that he would speak to them personally and show this to them. Not just see my content and be like, oh, I agree with that. No. Reading the Bible themselves. And listen, he is coming. I'm not even fishing for, right now I'm trying to teach these Christians who are keeping Pentecost. I do have Jewish friends I'm sharing this with, and some do see it, but this guy's completely out of left field. On his own, he's coming to this truth. He hasn't got it exactly right, but that's okay. Even the Sabbath, when you hear talking about measuring from Sunday to Sunday, right? I'm not gonna hit him on that, for the simple fact of where the bearing he has now and the direction he's going. He will figure this out. This guy's got the capability to do it.
That it was given either on the 3rd day of the month, because either they arrived on the 1st day, or it says they arrived on the 3 months from when they left Egypt. So either you can read that they arrived on the 1st day of the 3rd month or on the 15th day of the 3rd month, because that's actually exactly 3 months from when they left on the 1st month. Either way, 3 days later would either be the 3rd day, 1, 2, 3, or the 17th day, 15, 16, 17. Definitely not the 6th day. And again, they have no evidence for this. They're just following their own calculations and their own claims. Yet, growing up Orthodox, I never once heard that the holiday of Shavuot was a celebration of the harvest. Never once.
Never once heard that Shavuot is about the wheat harvest? You mean to tell me the rabbis are not teaching anyone that Shavuot is about a wheat harvest? Shocking.
Even though that's the only thing that it is in the Torah, all I heard was this is the giving of the Torah. And so they have all sorts of narratives and myths surrounding the giving of the Torah, where, for example, they say that the Israelites slept in the night before, and they slept in during the day, and they were late to the giving of the Torah. Evidence, again, no.
Do you read that anywhere in chapter 19, you guys? Does it say that they took a bath and they washed their clothes, and on the 3rd day they woke up late? they showed up late. They slept in. No, but the rabbis has a narrative, right? In the oral Torah, all right, the Talmud. He's calling BS. You see, I love this.
Torah evidence. This is just rabbinic lore and mythology that somehow is constituted into law. So because of the fact that the Jews slept in and were late to the revelation at Sinai, now to correct their mistake, we have to stay up all night. So they stay up all night on the first night of Shavuot, because they start tonight. They'll say, so tonight, Thursday night, they're going to stay up all night and read Torah, which is another way of saying read Talmud all night, in order to rectify.
I love that. Did you see what he just did? They're going to read Torah all night, and he says it's another way of saying we're going to read Talmud, right?
The sin of the Israelites sleeping in, even though again that's never mentioned. All sorts of other narratives.
Incidentally, when you hear Paul talking about Torah or law, he talks about law is good or law is bad. He's talking about the Torah or the Talmud. He doesn't distinguish which one at the time. That's your job, to understand the context. Everybody who was listening to him understood the context. We come back 2,000 years later and try to understand what he's saying, and he looks like a bipolar person, because in one place he says the Torah is bad, the next place he says the Torah is good. What law? He's talking about Talmud. When he says the law is bad, he's talking about Talmudic law.
Narratives will be told, like the fact that God hung the mountain over the Israelites' head, telling them that if they don't accept the Torah, he's going to drop the mountain on their head. Again, that story never appears in the Torah. That story appears in the Talmud. And I've spoken to Jews, unaffiliated, unreligious Jews, who say, I heard that story, and I was like, I'm out. If God is literally forcing us to accept it, then I'm out. And again, the thing is, that story never happened, right? So you may find other excuses not to follow the Torah, but that shouldn't be one of them, because that's not a story in the Torah. God actually asks the Israelites, do you want to do that? And
Right. He got a verbal contract with them guys in the chapter 19. When he comes down, he gives them the 10 commandments. He's saying, will you keep my commandments? Everybody agrees. And then he says, okay, Moses, come up on the mountain with me. I'm paraphrasing, by the way. Let's hammer out the details. And I meant that as a pun, right? So he comes down with the stone tablets that Yah took the finger and wrote the law on, right? So he's not giving the law in chapter 19. He's making an agreement, a covenant with them. He asks the question, will you? And they say, yes, we will. He's right.
and great, they accept it. So beautiful. They accept the Torah. They say, we will do it. We will hear it. We'll do whatever you tell us, God. And that's a actual situation where the Jews are accepting it willingly. So it's the opposite of the rabbi's story. And so this is what it looks like. Now, culturally, the greatest part of Shavuot is, get ready, cheesecake. Cheesecake is the stamp of culture for Shavuot.
Right. So they're not waving loaves of bread at Shavuot, you guys. And the only ones that are doing that, and I know this from research, is some Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews. And it's not wheat bread, it's barley bread. And if you want the facts on that, I can provide that. I can show you a clip from a Jewish scholar who is talking about his family tradition and what they've always done and what he's known Jews from his sect to do, which was make barley bread at Shavuot. Now this guy's telling you that most of them are making cheesecake. You can't find a cheesecake in Miami right now because they're all balled up, because that's what they're doing. They're not waving bread at 50 days because you can't. First of all, they're eating cheesecake.
Where we eat cheesecake. Now, who doesn't love a good cheesecake? I'd eat a cheesecake on a Wednesday. I don't need to create a random made-up holiday in order to eat cheesecake. Now, what's the reason why they say you need to eat cheesecake? Well, it's because of another made-up rabbinic law, which is that because their vessels were not rabbinically kosher, because they didn't know how to separate between meat and milk, and they didn't know all the laws of kosher slaughter, and they didn't know all the made-up rabbinic laws that the rabbis made up. Therefore, all they could do was just eat dairy. So they had some milk, they had some cheese, and I mean, I thought they were eating manna, but whatever. They were eating dairy, and so that's it. That's it. All right, we eat cheesecake. Who doesn't like cheesecake? And they get you at the door like, you don't like cheesecake? Come on in and have cheesecake. And it's like, isn't this for God? Isn't this a holiday? Like what? No. This is just, again, a cultural moment, and not
Man-made traditions, guys. If you didn't know, I'm not only into codes. All right, the hidden things, revealing the truth, deciphering the hidden, but man-made traditions. The Bible exposes it. I made it a mission to reject man-made traditions, whoever they are, rabbinic, Catholic, Pentecostal. It doesn't matter. I'm not following man's traditions, you guys. I want to follow the word. What Yah says, what Yeshua did, that's what I want. Enough with traditions. And this is what frustrates me here recently, where I'm having a hard time getting people to let go of Christian tradition. Like Pentecost at 50 days, the Spirit's poured out, but it is directly connected to the wheat and what happened with the giving of the 2 tablets and that day being defiled. And this is why Yah hid it in the first place and destroyed his own temple both times at the same period. He hid that day. It appears at the time of no moon, meaning we're at new moon period. So even the moon is hidden at that period. And by the way, the other feast on the other side are full moon periods. So it's the only feast period that is hidden.
one thing that I told you, which is what defines the entire process of counting the Omer and the celebration of Shavuot in Orthodox Judaism. Not one of that is mentioned in the Torah, because what they have going on is a period of mourning for Rabbi Akiva's students. a day of celebration for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's death, and then they have a giving of the Torah celebration that, again, is nowhere to be found in the Torah. So, look, I wasn't looking for this understanding. I'm not wanting necessarily to do this, but when I was reading the Torah, this is exactly what the Torah said to me. And this is what...
Listen to him. He wasn't even looking for it. The Bible started speaking to him and revealing truth. That's the Holy Spirit, folks.
What it will say to you, because I'm going to go through every single source in the Torah that mentions Shavuot. And you're going to see that Shavuot is very clearly the celebration of the harvest. It is marked by the beginning of the harvest. The count that the Torah describes looks nothing like the count that the rabbis describe. And the celebration and the holiday that the Torah describes looks nothing like the celebration and the holiday that the rabbis describe. So without any further...
Okay, I must say this. When I watch him read the scriptures, he is still at 7 Sabbaths complete is 50 days. He doesn't understand that there's another 50 days on that. He is only what he's seeing is, wait a minute, man, we can't be ready at 50 days. And if you noticed at the beginning of his broadcast, somebody in the chat was saying, it doesn't seem like the agriculture is ready yet, right? Well, guys, at this point today, around this time, it is in fact barley that's being harvested, not wheat. Barley is the first grain to come into golden. And this is what we're putting the sickle to. The standing grain is barley. And then we count 7 weeks, as it says in Deuteronomy. That's a total of 100 days or more, including the new moons. We're talking about 102 days, 118 days from the time of planting. Okay? The 102 days is from wave sheep. But that grain was planted at the new moon closest to the equinox. It is only going to be golden in the summer, okay? Right now, barley is the only thing to be, and I'm going to show you another video I got from a guy that's growing biblical grains because he has a bakery. He makes his own, I mean, this guy pays farmers to grow his own grains and he bakes his own bread, organic grains. Fascinating channel. I'm going to introduce you to that one too. And he's actually today put out a video of what the grain looks like that's going to be harvested this summer, and he's excited about it. He's showing us what the grain looks like, and he doesn't even know about Shavuot, you guys. He's not marking this with what's going on in the Bible. He's doing it because the grain is planted at a specific time. All right.
Further ado, let's get started. Let's start going through the sources in the Torah that discuss Shavuot. We're going to begin in the book of Exodus. So if anyone has a Bible with them, definitely feel free to pull it out. It'll be useful in this little journey through the Torah that we're going to do, journey through the 5 books to actually understand the true nature of Shavuot. So we're going to begin with Exodus 23. So Exodus chapter 23, God is telling Moses about the festivals. 23:16.
I love the fact that he used the Torah alone, because you can discover this, you guys, with the Torah alone. You can discover that the days are off on what is being observed. Now, when you overlay it with all the other information, that's when it becomes overwhelmingly clear that we've been off. All right. So kudos to this guy. He's using the Torah alone to come to his conclusions. Well, that and the Holy Spirit is leading him, right? The word come alive to him and spoke to him. So those 2 factors.
Exodus 23:16. Here we are. So here we have it. The holiday of the harvest, the first fruits of your works, when you plant the field. Okay, so that is, here we're being told about the 3 pilgrimage festivals: the holiday of the unleavened breads, Passover, the holiday of the harvest, Shavuot, and the holiday of the ingathering of the harvest, which is actually Sukkot. See, because Sukkot is the Feast of the Tabernacles, the booths where we dwell in the booths and the huts, and we commemorate that time when we left Egypt and we were under God's protection in the huts. But a key element of Sukkot, which is in the 7th month, which is before the turning point and the end of the year, not like the actual end of the year, but the end of the seasons as it's going out into the winter. It's the ingathering. See, because in the winter we don't have.
And the ingathering, you know what the ingathering is marked by? Spica. in the palm, in the hand of Virgo in the sky. It's marking the end of the ingathering. Remember what I told you already? The beginning of the ingathering, the first fruits of the wheat harvest is Shavuot. That runs all summer long. The wheat and the grapes and the olives, all of that is done through the summer harvest. And then in the autumn or in the fall, that's when corn comes in. Corn is the last. Corns and pumpkins and things like that. They come in the autumn, right? So if he overlays the agriculture exactly, he's going to see more, you guys. I love this. This is just awesome.
Crops growing. So we take the completion of the harvest and we gather it in and we have it for us for the winter. So that's what's going on in the 7th month. So we have 3 holidays and it's all seasonal as well, right? Passover is in the beginning of the spring equinox. So what's happening in the spring equinox is plants are just beginning to sprout. That's when we leave Egypt. That's the commemoration of the leaving of Egypt. Then we have the holiday of Shavuot, which is the harvest season. That's going to be closer to the summer time, to the transitioning period between spring and summer. So right about now, the harvest begins. And what we have going on there is a celebration of the beginning of the harvest.
He's absolutely right.
And
it is the beginning of the barley harvest right now. I'm going to show you, like I said, the guy with the bakery and his own wheat growing. He's in his own personal field right now, and you're going to see the condition of that. It's the barley that's being harvested right now.
What we have towards the autumn winter time, where the year is switching from autumn to winter, back in the 7th month, more towards, this is like October time in modern terms, that is when we celebrate Sukkot, and that's when we gather in all of the harvest so that we can have it in storage for the winter time. So look very clearly, Exodus 23:16, the festival of the harvest, the first fruits of your works, which you plant in the field. Okay, so Shavuot is very clearly the festival of the harvest, and it's the first fruits, more particularly. So the beginning of the harvest. Now it begs the question, which harvest, right? Because there's so many different harvests. There are the harvests of barley, there's the harvest of fruits, there's the harvest of vegetables. What harvest are we referring to here when we discuss the harvest? So thankfully, and I've heard people say things like, oh, it's the festival of the barley harvest, but this is completely ignorant.
You guys, it is the festival of the barley right now, because the beginning of the barley harvest starts with wave sheaf. Even though the count is marking, it's marking 2 things. It's marking the beginning and the end of the barley. The end of the barley is the beginning of, when they are putting the sickle to the grain to start the harvest of the barley, that is when the count goes another 50 days or 7 weeks. That's when the wheat will be harvested. That's when you're going to put the sickle to that grain. Okay. So I don't think he understands it spread out like that, but he's on the right track.
Because the Torah explicitly says which harvest we are celebrating when we celebrate Shavuot. Have a look at Exodus 34:22.
So he's agreeing. He's saying, man, it can't be wheat right now. It's too early. It's got to be barley.
Exodus 34:22 reads, and the holiday of Shavuot, the festival of the weeks. Okay, so Shavuot, by the way, means weeks because we're counting weeks. You count the holiday of the weeks. You shall make for yourself the first fruits of the wheat harvest. Okay, so this is a very key point. And this is a great source because this proves to us that Shavuot is a count from the beginning of the wheat harvest. So remember, this is something to keep in mind. How do we know which harvest to count from? The wheat harvest. When does the wheat harvest begin? The wheat harvest begins later, not right at the beginning of spring. So this is something to keep in mind because we have another source here, a very interesting source.
All right, so he's still thinking he's still what he's doing. He knows it's not in the beginning of spring. He's thinking the best is it's got to be at the end of spring. All right. So imagine he's looking through binoculars and it's kind of fuzzy. He can make out what's going on, but he's not crystal clear yet, right?
regarding the plague of the hail. Okay, hail. The hail was one of the last.
So right here, he's figuring out, and I've shown you this too. Exodus chapter 9, where in the seventh plague, you can see the state of the grain there. So Yah put that in there. So we will have a marker of what the grain, listen, any agriculturalist, anybody who grows these grains can hear and read the state of that grain and tell you the exact day those grains were planted. Did you know that? That information is there for a reason, because we can spot the exact day those grains are planted within a day or two. Okay? He's figuring it out.
Plagues of the 10 plagues before the Israelites left Egypt. And what it says by the plague of the hail. So we'll turn back a little bit to Exodus.
So the reason this is important is we're getting a benchmark on the grains just a few days before wave sheaf. Okay, so we know when wave sheaf is, and we're getting a benchmark a few days before, approximately 4 days before, and we can know exactly when those grains were planted.
Exodus 9:31 talks about the fact that the barley was just ripening at this time, which is even before Passover, right? And what it says is it refers to the flax and the barley that was struck by the hail because it was already ripening, and the barley.
All right, so the barley's in ear, and the wheat has not come up yet. Meaning it's just grass. It's just now breaking the ground. Meaning it's only been planted about 14 days prior. All right, so that's the information we can glean there. The barley is in ear. It's in an advanced state. The wheat is still breaking the grass, just coming up.
Barley was aviv. It uses this term aviv. Aviv actually refers to early spring, right? And so what ripens in the early spring? Barley, right? When is Passover? Passover is in the early spring. It's in the month of Aviv, right? So for people to correlate Passover with Shavuot, and this is something we're going to discuss, because what I'm going to present to you is a view on Shavuot that you will not hear anywhere else. You will not hear this from the rabbinics, obviously. You will not hear this even.
This is so funny that he says that. So this leads me to believe he has no clue about my information. I love that.
From the Karaites, because even the Karaites take the view that Shavuot is somehow connected to Passover. But in the Torah, we're not going to see any actual linkage between Passover and Shavuot. Yes, Shavuot chronologically takes place after Passover. Passover is at the beginning of the year, the beginning of the spring, and then you have the year going out into the summertime, where you have the summer wheat. That's where Shavuot is. Now, so chronologically, Shavuot is between Passover and Sukkot, but Shavuot does not even have a date. And this is, again, another really key element. The only holiday in the Torah that doesn't have a date. It's entirely based off of the harvest, and the harvest is not going to be on the exact same day every year. So essentially what we're looking at here is the fact that...
And the harvest is, or the grains in question are planted by the stars. And that is going to oscillate each year between March and April. And this is why every year it has to be counted and calculated. It's not the same every year. It's not going to be every April we're starting here. No, that's not how the clock works. And if you're doing that, Jubilees, Zadok people, you're wrong. And first of all, the Sabbath, and he doesn't know this yet, the Sabbath is not Saturday. I don't think he's seen Exodus 16 and see how those dates given there, which you can do the same thing with that on the calendar. The exact days given there, you can reckon what the Sabbaths are. They are established in Exodus 16.
Barley is Aviv. Barley happens in the Aviv time, in the early spring equinox at Passover. However, the wheat harvest, which is what we're celebrating here, as we continue in Exodus 9:32, it says, "But the wheat and the spelt was not struck by the hail, because they were not sprouted yet. They were still not even ready to. They were not even coming out of the ground enough to have been struck by the hail." So essentially, wheat ripens later than barley. And so if Shavuot is the holiday of the wheat harvest, as we can see in Exodus 34:22, that Shavuot is the first fruits of the wheat harvest, now we know that Shavuot is going to be later on in the year. It's not going to be in the month of Aviv. It's not going to be in the month of the spring. It's going to be later on a little bit in the year. So that is what we got from Exodus. Now we move on to Leviticus. All right. Leviticus is where we find all the holidays really spelled out in detail, the most detail, and your go-to chapter for holidays for the 5 festivals, which the 5 festivals, I mean, you have the Shabbat, which is in its category of its own. Then you have the 5 festivals: Passover, Shavuot, Day of Remembrance, Day of Atonement, and Sukkot. It's 5 festivals in the Torah. So as we move on to Leviticus 23, we will read all about Shavuot, okay? And it's a bit long, so bear with me. But again, if you want to be able to respond to the rabbis, you got to actually know what the Torah says better than them. So have a look here at Leviticus 23, beginning with verse 9, okay? Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come to the land that I give to you, and you reap its harvest."
All right. Now, right here, I want to point out, McCall Scripture Studies, Yah and Jennifer Babson, Yah is speaking to this is where the template applies only to the people and when they go into the land and when they're farming. This is when the template is established. When they're out in the desert eating manna, they're not harvesting the land. So they're not going by that count yet. It's when they go in there. So it's specifically them, when you go into the land, not when McCall plants the 3 sisters. And, it's not saying that at all. And it doesn't have anything to do with Spica. Okay. Just like this guy is calling out the rabbis for not using the scriptures verbatim and keeping to what Yah says, but making up traditions of men or pagans. McCall Scripture Studies does the same thing, you guys, with the pagan influence.
Then you shall bring a sheaf. Sheaf refers to like a bundle, a measure of wheat. The first of
that is not wheat, my brother. That's barley at that point. It's the ripening of the barley. The barley is still mostly green. Okay, it has to get completely golden. At this point, when the wave sheaf is happening, that barley's been planted approximately 63 days. And it's got about another 50 days to go. Okay?
The harvest to the priest. Now look at this. It says, when you come to the land, which means that Shavuot was not even celebrated in the desert, because God is speaking to Moses in the context of the desert. And he's saying, only when you come to the land and reap its harvest will you actually be observing this holiday of Shavuot, which is, again, further evidence that Shavuot has nothing to do with the giving of the Torah, because the Torah was given already at this point in the...
All right. So he's again, he hasn't figured this out yet, that it is connected to giving of the Torah. The Torah is not given in chapter 19. He's figured that out. The Torah, the Shavuot is not in chapter 19 because it doesn't match up with the giving of the law. He doesn't understand the giving of the law is actually when Moses comes down with the text. All right. So I give him a pass on that, you guys. I'm not going to ding him on that because this guy has got the right bearing. He's going to figure it out.
Desert, but Shavuot...
Mind you, this is his first year not doing Shavuot as tradition. And I thank Yah for this young man. Bless him, Father. Open his eyes and his heart and let him even see the Messiah.
Is only practiced as a celebration of the harvest, unrelated to Shavuot. So unrelated to the giving of the Torah. So you bring this sheaf, a bundle of wheat of the first fruits of the harvest to the priest. And verse 11, the priest shall wave the bundle of wheat before Yahweh.
Right, it's not a bundle of wheat. He's mixing that up. This is in fact barley at wave sheaf.
For your appeasement, on the day after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. So now this is again where the key interpretation.
And listen to the logic, because at wave sheaf, he just established in reading Exodus 9 that the wheat is just looking like grass. All right, that's 4 days before wave sheaf. So how do we have from grass to a fully grown in-ear ripening? So you see the logic there. He hasn't figured that out yet. I'm not going to ding him on it. I'm just pointing it out. All right. That, and maybe he's misspeaking here. That could be too. He could be misspeaking. He could be meaning to say barley, and it's because I do that. I think one thing and say another sometimes, and I look like an idiot. I'm not saying that's what's happening, but it's possible that he's thinking barley but saying wheat. It's not wheat that we're waving sheaves of. Okay. The only thing that we wave concerning wheat is loaves of bread at Shavuot. And by the way, I love the way he points out we're not waving cheesecakes at Shavuot time. Nowhere in the text does it tell you to do that. So, yeah.
Nations come into play. And the rabbis interpret the day after the Sabbath to mean the day after the Sabbath of Passover. Okay. So again, Sabbath, Shabbat means a rest day, right?
Again, here he's on Saturday still. Don't ding him from that, you guys. Again, he's still finding his way.
When I tell you Shabbat out of context, if I say Shabbat, Shabbat means the Shabbat of the seventh day of the week. Only not very often are the other festivals referred to as Shabbats. They are sometimes referred to as Shabbats, as rest days. But again, when you read about Shavuot, Shavuot has nothing to do with Passover. Shavuot has to do with the harvest. So if I say out of context to you, wave this offering on the day after the Sabbath, that means Sunday. That means the day after the seventh day of the week. It doesn't mean the day after Passover. But the rabbis interpret this to mean the day after the first day of Passover. Wave this offering on the day after the first day of Passover. So they begin counting on the first day after the first day of Passover. But again, taking a literal reading, unrelated to Passover, because Shavuot is unrelated to Passover, not to mention, again, the harvest wouldn't even be ready by the time of Passover, because Passover is right at the beginning of the spring. On the day after the Sabbath, on Sunday, the priest shall wave, the Omer shall wave the offering. And it continues with certain offerings that should be given, again, temple offerings, meal offerings, libations. Verse 14, Leviticus 23:14 is an interesting verse because it also creates a standard for how to have a united count, because it says that all bread and plump kernels and wheat kernels you shall not eat until this very same day, until the priest brings the offering of your God, an eternal decree for your generations and all of your dwelling places. So, yeah, unfortunately, we don't have priests and united harvests and Omer offerings and all that, but it is an eternal decree. So when we reunite as a people, we will be observing this. Now, it says you cannot eat any of the bread and the wheat from the harvest until you bring the offering of God. So this is a key theme in the Torah, right? Give your firstborns to God, give your first fruits to God. You cannot even consume of the new harvest until you bring the offering to Yahweh, which means that, let's say you began your harvest on Wednesday and the Omer was only brought the day after the Sabbath. On Sunday, you would not be able to consume of the new harvest until the Omer was brought. Let's say you started your harvest a week before the Omer was brought. You may not eat from the new harvest, from the first of the harvest, until you bring that offering to Yahweh. So it's a beautiful idea and practice, because ultimately it means you cannot partake of the new harvest until you bring your offering to Yahweh. And that's a very powerful point to take in. And here is where we are introduced to the count. How do we count? How do we count the 7 weeks? Okay, this is the source that you're going to need. Leviticus 23:15. And you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day that you bring the Omer, the sheaf, the bundle of the waving, so this wave offering.
All right. Okay. Now he interjected the Omer word there, and he's just finding his way. I do have to ding him on that because he's using the Torah only, but he's inserting Omer in there, brother. It doesn't say Omer. It says you'll bring a wave sheaf. The rabbis introduced the Omer, and it had a lot to do with a rabbi, Ben Uzazel, the Targum of Jonathan. You can find this where he is the very first one I can find on record. So a smoking gun to use the word Omer. It is definitely a rabbinic thing. So we're not counting Omers, brother. We're waving a sheaf
That you bring to Yahweh From that day after the Sabbath, count 7 complete Sabbaths. 7 complete Sabbaths they shall be. Until the day after the 7th Sabbath, you shall count 50 days. Then on the 50th day, you bring a new meal offering to Yahweh, and you celebrate Shavuot. So Shavuot is the celebration.
All right. It doesn't say that either. It's 7 Sabbaths complete, and then you shall number 50 days. It's giving you a break point there because we're talking about two different things. He doesn't understand that yet. As you're going to see later in this video, he's thinking that he's going to be celebrating Shavuot at the end of May. It's because he's trying to reconcile that 50 days, and he can't. And even at that 50 days, I'm going to show you what the wheat looks like. It's not going to be golden, brother. It's going to be green. And so I'm sure this guy is very aware of the argument with the rabbis in the Talmud in the medieval times when they had the same conundrum. They had green wheat. And so what do? Well, some of them argued that we're harvesting barley and making wheat bread out of barley. This is where the Sephardics are doing that, and the Mizrahi. And then you had others like Ashkenazi that were saying, no, we're cutting green grain and we're laying out in the sun and drying it, and then we're making it. Well, that's not fine flour. All right. He hasn't figured that out yet.
Of the harvest on the
or hasn't put that together yet.
50th day after you start counting the beginning of the harvest. So I want you to pay real close attention to this, because this is where the rabbis really pull a fast one on people. The Torah says you count from the day after the Sabbath, 7 complete Sabbaths. So I'm counting from Sunday to Sabbath, Sunday to Sabbath, Sunday to Sabbath, 7 times. 7 times 7, 49. On the day after the 7th is the 50th day. That is Shavuot. Shavuot's always going to fall out on a Sunday, and it's the day after the 7th Sabbath. Now, the rabbis, they translate the word Shabbat here as week, which is extremely manipulative, because when it suits their narrative, they translate Shabbat as rest day, which could mean any rest day, even Passover. But then when it says to count 7 Shabbats, they say count 7 weeks. Now, nowhere in the Torah the word Shabbat mean week. Shabbat always means rest day. The word for week is Shavua. There is no other place in the Torah where Shabbat means week. Yet here...
Right. So the reason why it does it here is because this agricultural calendar is connected to the sun and the moon. And so we're talking about lunar months, which is going to include a 1 or 2 day lunar cycle. He's not including that in his observation. He hasn't figured that out yet. Right. So give him a pass. But that's why we have to count them out, because, you know, how the new moons fall. It's not going to be the same every year. It's going to oscillate. Just like the equinox, the oscillation between April and March and April for when Passover is. It's going to oscillate. The same thing happens like this with the new moon. It's going to oscillate. And so you have to count those days specifically and mark where the new moon is to continue your count. The 7 Sabbaths complete is going to include that. And then you number 50 days. Right, so you're going to have two new moons in there, or 2 new moon periods, which could be, because a new moon period could be one day or 2 days. Right, quite often it could be like 2 days, and then the next one it would be 1 day. So you got 3 days in there that has to be numbered. You can't just blow through and just count 7 continuous Sabbaths. 7-day continuous count. You're going to miss those new moon days, because it's directly connected to the agriculture. Grains are planted by the sun and the moon and the equinox. You have to use them as markers when you do that.
The rabbis translate Shabbat to mean week. So, but in the Torah it says you should celebrate Shavuot on the day after the 7th Sabbath. Okay, now this year they're celebrating it on Thursday. That's not after Sabbath. That's not the day after the 7th Sabbath. That's the day after the 7th Tuesday, 7th Wednesday, right? So that's not the day after the...
All right, so you see the conundrum he's currently in. He doesn't understand that it's a lunar solar calendar. So it doesn't matter what Gregorian day it is in the first place, because he has got a fixed day, Saturday. And so he's counting from a... But even still doing that, this guy comes up within 4 days of the actual day, folks. That's remarkable. with me. That's the Holy Spirit leading him. He is going to find this day.
Sabbath. So,
and by the way, if you would, I'm going to reach out to him, but I would like some of my viewers to do the same thing. I would like to have a conversation with this brother and fill in the gaps with him, because I think the light bulb is just going to just explode in his head. Really, I think it's just going to be like, what?
the rabbis have a severe issue with their reading. Now, Karaites actually take a more literal meaning, and they count from the first Sunday after Passover. But I still think that the Karaites, why are they linking it to Passover? It has nothing to do with Passover. You don't start from the first Sunday after Passover. You start counting from the first Sunday after the harvest begins. That's the text is explicit. When you reap the harvest, that's when you bring the Omer offering, and that's when you start counting on the day after the Sabbath. So again, this is explicit. There is no evidence to the contrary. And so the Torah brings down a bunch of offerings. You bring temple offerings. Again, I'll skip over that. Down to Leviticus 23:21. You shall call on this very same day a holy proclamation. A holy calling shall be for you. All laborious work you shall not do, an eternal decree in all of your dwelling places for all your generations. So Shavuot is on the 50th day. It is a day where you do no work. It is a day of celebration where you celebrate the new harvest. And you do this for all time. This is the holiday of Shavuot. All right. So Shavuot is very clearly a celebration of the harvest, marked by the beginning of the harvest. And 7 weeks after the beginning of the harvest, you can, and again, the way the count is set up, it's a very clear count, right? You can't get it wrong. From Sunday to Sabbath, 7 complete Sabbaths until the day after the 7th Sabbath. That's a count that you could institute at any point in the year. And again, Shavuot is the only holiday that doesn't have a specific date, which means that it's not actually going to have the same date every year. It'll fluctuate depending on the fluctuations of the harvest season. It's not always on the same day. And so that explains it all, really. And I'll give you 2 more sources, just because we're moving through the 5 books here. We have Numbers and Deuteronomy. Numbers is a little quick source here. Numbers chapter 28. Numbers chapter 28 deals with all of the sacrificial offerings for all the various different holidays. Numbers 28, 26. And on the day of the first fruits, when you bring the new meal offering before Yahweh on your weeks, so it's again the celebration of the weeks, a holy calling shall be for you, all laborious work you shall not do. So we do this by counting the weeks. We do this by celebrating the first fruits of the first harvest, of the wheat harvest. And on the 50th day is the holy day, forbidden in work, and a day of celebration and a holiday. Now, Deuteronomy 16. Deuteronomy 16 is where the festivals are all discussed in Deuteronomy. So again, mark down these sources. They're very, very helpful. Leviticus 23 and Deuteronomy 16. Here in Deuteronomy 16:9, we see 7 weeks you shall count for yourself from the beginning, from when the sickle first is put to the standing grain. Okay, so that is another way of saying when the harvest begins. The sickle.
All right, so that's the beginning of the harvest of the barley. That's when you begin to count 7 weeks to the beginning of the wheat. So I mean, that's the connection there. Most of the people that are doing the 50-day Pentecost Shavuot thing, they're misunderstanding this particular scripture, and they don't overlay it with the grain and the other in Leviticus 23, and then the information from Exodus 9 to understand the planting cycle. If you don't understand all that, you can misunderstand what's happening here. The standing grain the sickle's being put to is golden barley, which 50 days ago was just ripening. Okay. 50 days ago, it had been planted for 63 days. Now, golden is being harvested. That's the complete cycle of barley, folks. Now, 7 weeks from now, guess what's going to be ready? Wheat. There's a 7-week period from the beginning of the barley harvest to the beginning of the wheat harvest. There's exactly 7 weeks.
Is that half moon farming object that they would use to harvest wheat. When you first put the sickle to the standing grain, that means that the standing grain is ready to be harvested. It's standing. Its harvest is going to begin. When you put the sickle to the standing grain, that is when you begin to count the 7 weeks. So you begin to count the.
That's when you begin to count the 7 weeks. So, incidentally, in the Talmud, and I'm sure you can find this too, you find an argument with the rabbis about this particular thing, and they argue that this right here, right now, is the beginning of the wheat harvest, and this is where we are harvesting wheat for 7 weeks. You see? Okay. Well, what if we got a field done before those 7 weeks? All right, so if we're harvesting our fields, think of this logic. You have a field. Let's say it's 3 acres, right? And the wheat harvest is beginning today. Are we supposed to stretch that wheat harvest 7 weeks just to fulfill what the Bible says? You understand where I'm going with this? I can harvest that field in 1 day if I got enough people. In ancient times, doing it by hand. And by the way, they didn't plant fields like they do today in Kansas, where they're planting hundreds of acres. They couldn't manage that in ancient times. They're planting fields that they can manage by hand. So they got 1 acre, 2 acre, 3 acre fields that they're managing. If you got enough people, you can harvest a field in 1 day. All right, so are we suggesting that we have 7 fields that we can do weekly? We can harvest we could take our time and harvest a field per week and stretch it out to 7 weeks to fulfill that biblical commandment. You think that's what God's saying? No, the rabbis were wrong. Their assumption in the Talmud that we are counting 7 weeks from the time that we put the sickle to the grain, meaning every day we're numbering 7 weeks. It's going to take us 7 weeks to harvest our wheat. My gosh, how big is the field? Because this is ancient times. How big is the field? If it's going to take an army of people 7 weeks to harvest a field, how big is that freaking field? You see the logic? We didn't have combines in ancient times. We can harvest hundreds of acres of wheat in a couple of days. In ancient times, 1 acre, 2 acre, 3 acre, 5 acres, 10 acres, an army of people, it's going to be 1 or 2 days. It's not going to take 7 weeks. Israel, go look at the logic there, my brother. When they argue in the Talmud that they're numbering the days, the weeks of the harvest, meaning we're harvesting wheat for 7 weeks. Well, what if we're done in 2? What do we do then? That doesn't make any sense to me. And if I wish I could have had an influence in that argument when these rabbis are trying to argue about agriculture, which they had no idea they know nothing about. They know more about diamonds than they do about wheat harvest. I guarantee you. Anyway, I digress.
7 weeks from the beginning of the harvest. We were like, well, when do you start? You start from the beginning of the harvest. And you shall perform this holiday of the weeks for Yahweh by offering a donation of what you have to the temple as Yahweh blesses you, and you shall rejoice before Yahweh, you and your children and your servants and your Levite and the sojourner and the orphan and the widow who are in your midst, in the place that Yahweh your God chooses to rest his name. And remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and you shall observe and keep these decrees. So remember that you were a slave. Remember that you owe your life to God. Remember that everything that you have is from God. And this is so much more wholesome than like the whole rabbinic shebang that they create, all that. Like, this is not some holier than thou celebration. It's a celebration of food. All right. Like, oh, I'm sorry. Is that not holy enough for you? You eat food every single day, right? Your sustenance relies on food. You pray to God every day that he provides you with money. What is money? Bread, right? You want the thing that can provide.
That is a very witty connection there. Um, I've never thought about, but he's right, and he's Jewish, by the way. So that he sees that connection. We're talking about sustenance, right? Something that's a constant. There's cycles. There's counting in this, right? And by the way, wheat in ancient times was considered a form of money, a commodity.
Provide you with sustenance, and God is kind enough to give us a new harvest, to give us the beauty of all of the food that we get to eat. And the least we can do is celebrate a celebration of the harvest for our King, for Yahovah, for our Father, our Creator, who has done everything for us and given us everything.
Amen.
And one of the beautiful laws here, quickly turning back to Leviticus 23:22, it says, when you reap the harvest of your land, do not finish the corner of your field and the gleanings of your harvest. So when you're harvesting your field, leave over the corner of your field and all the gleanings. So gleanings refer to like the droppings. When you're harvesting, there's like stalks dropping on the floor. Leave all that. Do not collect it. Leave it for the poor and for the sojourner. I am Yahovah your God. So again,
you can see that in Ruth, by the way, where the four corners are left. So that is a biblical concept. The field owners were required by Yah to leave the four corners for the poor, meaning that was a tax by Yah, in other words. And by the way, if you harvested that and didn't leave it for the widows and the orphans, Yah would judge you. You would not have rains. You would not have a harvest. He would punish you for that. And this was a concept that people lived by.
God is telling us to love the stranger, to love the less fortunate, to have a land that is supportive, that is open, free food for the less fortunate. Just come and take. Come and take. That is the level of support that God requires from us. This is actually the beauty of the holiday that God has given us. And so that's really a wonderful, wonderful prospect. And I think it's actually a beautiful holiday. And I just want to address a few challenges that I've heard to my approach to the way that I've just read this to you, which again, I genuinely believe I have not inserted my own interpretation because I've read to you exactly what the Torah says, but you be the judge. All right. I'm not claiming to have the authority. Like when you ask the rabbis, how do you know what you're saying? They say, well, we know, shut up. Right. No, they actually cannot demonstrate anything that they say from the Torah. Whereas what I'm telling you is exactly just word for word what the Torah says. But a few very good challenges that I've heard to my position is, first of all, the festivals in the Torah are called appointed times, right? And the way that I'm describing Shavuot here is it's kind of a floating holiday. It doesn't really have an appointed time because it can be at a different time every year. And so
well, a different time every year on the Gregorian. I need to point this out. But every year on Yah's calendar, the agricultural calendar that's connected to the sun, moon, and stars, it will fall at a new moon time when there's no moon. There's no moon. We're coming on a crescent, so it's marking not only a new month but a point, and it's marking Av. By the way, yeah, this is why it's significant. The destruction of the temple. That new moon has been concealed for 2,000 years, guys. And this one is just, he's not even Christian. He's a Karaite at best, folks. He hasn't even found who the Messiah is. And I still love him. I'm not dinging him on that. This brother the Holy Spirit is leading him to truth. This encourages me. You don't know. If this doesn't speak to you, it speaks to me many volumes because it encourages me. I almost walked away from this YouTube channel and went fishing for a living. And Yah uses this guy to kind of salvage that, folks. And this was in a moment where I'm throwing my hands up and going, I can't get nobody to listen. I can't get a thumbs up on this truth, Father. If you don't send something I can grasp to, throw me a freaking lifesaver or something that I can cling to and show as a witness. And here comes this young man here.
People that are kind of sticklers for the calendar, they're going to look for a way to have an appointed time, calendrically speaking, based off of the calendar. But again, I would just respond by saying that, granted, it does not have an appointed date, but it still does have an appointed time. Shavuot is the time of the wheat harvest. It is a time where we are harvesting the wheat every single year. That is a appointed time. And again, the Torah itself does not provide us with a specific date. So the date is not what makes it an appointed time. What makes it an appointed time is the fact that it's every year appointed time. This is the harvest season of the wheat. That is the appointed time in reference to Shavuot. Another good challenge that I've heard is that when you look at Genesis chapter 1, on the fourth day of creation, God creates the luminaries in the sky. And he says, you shall use these luminaries as a way to tell the difference and the timings of the festivals. So I'll read that for you right here. It's Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. God says, may the luminaries in the firmament of the sky be there to separate between day and night, and they shall be for you as signs, as festivals, and days and years. So apparently the luminaries in the sky are there to structure a
calendar that's directly connected to the Sabbath, that's directly connected to the feast, that's directly connected to the grain. Remember that song they taught you in the, the neck bone's connected to the head bone, the head bone's connected, right? Everything's connected. Amazing how Yah works, folks.
A timetable where we can tell when the festivals are. And so if Shavuot is not based off of the luminaries of the sky and not based off of the calendar and the way it's structured, then how are we fulfilling Genesis 1 that says we should be able to judge the festivals off of the luminaries? And again, to that I would respond that the luminaries still play a role in determining Shavuot, maybe not based off of the calendar, but the luminaries predict the seasons as well, depending on how long the days are, how hot the sun is, how everything's structured. Shavuot is a seasonal holiday. It is, again, spring, summer, wheat. It is based off of the seasons, and the luminaries most definitely play a role in predicting the seasons and bringing about the harvest. So in that sense, the luminaries do play a role in this appointed time, though not as predicting the date of this holiday, but as predicting the time period that it'll take place in, because it takes place seasonally at this point, time of year, and that's something that's definitely dictated by the luminaries and the lights in the sky. And finally, the challenge would also be that if this holiday does not have a fixed appointed time, how could this be a united holiday, right? Because Shavuot is one of the pilgrimage festivals, and the pilgrimages of the Torah are marked by every male of Israel is obligated. Doesn't say females cannot come. Obviously, if females could come, that would be great. But the point is, males particularly are obligated to come see the face of Yahweh at the house of God at the temple and bring up their offerings and come celebrate at the temple. And that very much sounds like a united pilgrimage. So how do we have a united pilgrimage if we don't have a specified date for Shavuot? And to that, I would answer very clearly that the Omer offering marks the beginning of a united count. And that's the necessity for the Omer offering. When the harvest begins, and even within Israel, because Israel is geographically a large space of land, and the northern lands are colder than the southern lands, and so the harvest could be off by a couple weeks. May not necessarily all begin harvesting at the same time. But in order to have a united pilgrimage festival, we would have the priest bring the offering on the day after the Sabbath at a time where we would proclaim it in the land. This is the day of the Omer offering. This is the day that the count begins. And that explains the law in Leviticus 23:14 that says you may not eat from the bread and the wheat of the harvest until the priest brings the offering. So this means that even if you began your harvest a little bit before, even if you began the harvest a little bit before other people or a little bit after, the point is that you go based off of the Omer. All right. And so the Omer would be brought at a time when I guess the land is already in full swing harvest, where we had just begun and everyone is at that point of beginning the harvest. And we would judge it based off of how that works and proclaim this Sunday is the day that we bring the Omer. And now we all begin to count. And again, counting doesn't mean you sit there going, today is day one, today is day two, today is day three. You know, if someone puts you in a room and says, count 10 minutes, count. It doesn't mean you have to sit there saying 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? You look at your watch. When 10 minutes has passed, it's passed. So the point is, you calculate those 7 weeks, 7 Sabbaths, Sunday to Sabbath, 7 times 7, 49. On the day after the 7th Sabbath, on the 50th day, that is going to be Shavuot. So great, perfect. Shavuot that way can be united because we're counting from the Omer offering, and the priest bringing the Omer offering marks the unified beginning of the count of the weeks. And that way we can have a united pilgrimage festival as well. Now, obviously the question becomes modernly, how in the world do we do this? And granted, it is difficult because modernly we don't have a priest and we don't have an Omer. And people are living all over the world and we're scattered all over the place and climates are all over. And, we're receiving wheat and from all over the world. So how do we really calculate it modernly? And to answer that question is there's no obvious way, and I don't think we can even necessarily have a united harvest, especially because no one's actually
Right. He's got a point here. And this is why we have to use the original template. So we do know when he says when you go into the land and you start harvesting the grain there. Well, what grain are we talking about? Well, we're talking about specifically a specific kind of barley and a specific kind of wheat. By the way, there's thousands of varieties of those grains today, but we're not considering those. We're not considering grains that are growing out of season biblically. Does that make sense? We have to go by the original template. Okay? I've been telling you that from day one. We're talking about emmer wheat, ancient wheat. We're talking about ancient barley, which, by the way, it's called heritage grains today. It's still grown in Egypt, Israel, all the way to Turkey and into Mesopotamia, Iran, Iraq, those areas, the same grains. They grow the same ones. Granted, they also grain modified versions of those. That's another story. We're not talking about GMO, guys. We're talking about a specific grain. It's not rocket scientist, right? It's science. We're not trying to freaking solve an unsolvable, formula. The formula is simple. We know specifically what grain. All right. So when are we planting that? The Bible gives us the benchmark. The benchmark is, a few days before Passover and wave sheaf, we know the condition of the grain. And because we know the condition of the grain, we can estimate the exact days it was planted. And if we overlay that with everything we know from the scriptures, we can identify exactly what's going on with the grain, specific grain, with the specific text verbatim. No need to add or take away anything from the word. We can come to a very, highly probable conclusion. Please understand what I'm telling you.
Practicing this way. But what I do is I personally research by calling the Department of Agriculture. And nowadays you can even search it up with the AI who's very good at looking at all the databases and figuring out when does the harvest begin in my county, in my area where I live.
All right, so he's doing this locally. He's doing this locally, and I think this would be a good segue to my a second point of my presentation here. Here's a channel I've subscribed to. It's called Proof Bread. God, this is a beautiful channel. This guy this is like mom and pop kind of thing. They're doing organic. They're growing their own grains. They're not only growing their own grains, they're employing the farmers locally to grow the grain that they bake or actually process to flour and make into bread. And this is something I like, right? Proof bread. If you haven't, or if you're not familiar, please go and subscribe to this channel right here. Proof bread. They're in Arizona, and he just posted this 2 hours ago. 2 hours ago, he posted this video, and I saw that, and I was like, oh, wow. So the very moment that most people are celebrating Shavuot, this guy's walking out into his field. Instead of waving loaves of bread, he is showing us what the condition of the wheat is. And I've been telling you guys, and by the way, this guy grows biblical grains, the ancient grains, the heritage grains. And he's walking out into a field, which is a winter version. So that's a little more modern. But he does use the ancient grains, the emmer and several others that are more ancient. Okay. Yeah, yeah. So he is like another witness that Yah gave me, because he's out there talking about, look, all right, for first of all, the forecast for wheat in the United States is grim this year. I've been looking at some of the numbers, and because of the drought conditions, we've got a lot of losses. And by the way, if this happens consecutively over years, you can have famine. This has happened in the Bible before. 3 or more years in a row of those same conditions, you will have a famine coming up. All right. But this guy's walking out into a field that he has contracted himself, because he's going to use it for making bread locally in Arizona, Phoenix Mesa area. So I got a student down there, and she is growing emmer wheat. Shout out to Leanna. You may have saw her in the last video where she's showing a code there on Shavuot, right? Here's what his field looks like. He just made this video a couple hours ago, you guys. I want to share a few minutes of this, because this is the logic. And by the way, when you see in John 4 where Yeshua talks to the Samaritan woman, and then he makes a reference, because of he's speaking to Israel there, the lost sheep, and he's talking about a harvest a few moments later with his disciples, and he says, the fields are ripe for harvest. And they're looking out in the field, and it's nowhere near harvest. And it's very clear Yeshua is making an analogy, an idiom, if you will, where he is stating something that's seemingly absurd, but he's making a major point, because he's not talking about what you think he is talking about. He's not talking about the wheat field at that point. He's talking about the Samaritan woman and the effect of what his interaction with the Samaritan woman was. He came for the lost sheep. And what happened with her, they came, she brought back a crowd looking for Yeshua, because she said, I just found the Messiah. She was so ripe for harvest that what happened? One seed, she used one seed, she brought many seed, right? So that's wheat. You plant one wheat kernel, that is going to produce dozens of kernels in one wheat stalk, right? One makes many. Many makes many, exponential. Grows like wildfire. Please, somebody get the imagery I'm trying to relate to you with the grains. This is why the grains are in the stories. Thank you, Father, for this channel.
Something else, this field.
This is the condition.
We are now.
This is right now, May 23rd. He just put this out.
On the other side of the valley from the last time that we shot a video out in one of the fields of wheat that we're growing for the bakery. It is always wild to put things into such a grounded context, meaning like all of this is going to become bread that comes out of our bakery over the course of the next year. We're just about 2 months away from harvest right now. This field of hard red spring wheat.
Do the math, you guys. Do the math. We're about 2 months away from harvest. All right. So if we're at 50 days right now, add 2 months. Where are we at?
We'll probably go a little earlier than some of the heritage grains that are growing nearby at the
heritage grains. These are grains that are ancient grains. That's heritage grains. So this field is probably not a heritage grains because he doesn't say it is. It's probably a hybrid, and that's okay. That's not the point of this. The point, even with the hybrids, you can see it's not ready. It's not golden. It's not ready for harvest. We're not harvesting golden wheat right now.
other farm site. This is a huge milestone for us. It's a continuation of something that we just proved this past year, that we can, like our ancestors, make our own flour that we make bread with. That seems obvious, but we started baking bread because we felt so disconnected from our food system and we wanted to be a part of it. And as you get deeper and deeper into the food system, you realize just how crazy it is to begin with. We originally took over an artisan bakery in 2017. We were hand mixing our doughs, we were going out to market and delivering, a local product, but the flour was just bought at a big restaurant distribution plant and came from some industrial mill far away. Now, the flour that we make at Proof comes from this field and a few other fields around town. And it means that we know what is in our food all the way down to the...
Now, I must say that this wheat right here, which is an advanced state right now, is different than spring wheat. This is a winter version of, I'm pretty sure it's a winter version of wheat. So this is not going to be a heritage right here, but we can still see that the wheat is nowhere near this particular one. And I don't think this is emmer. This is not emmer, but it serves a purpose that even non-emmer species are not even ready for harvest right now.
The soil that it comes from. This field is grown by organic standards, although it's not certified. A lot of small farmers can't certify their land for one reason or another. It becomes a bit of a bureaucratic mess for them. But we also have the same farmer growing wheat in the same way on a certified organic plot down the road, and we planted our heritage grains that way. This
heritage grains are going to be the ancient grains, you guys, like emmer or corazon or another even.
Hard red spring is new for us. It's a modern grain. You can see that it...
All right, so he's telling you this is a modern grain here. So it's a little more advanced than what's going to be harvested later. The ones that the heritage that's going to be harvested later, it does not look like this now. So Leanna's wheat does not look like this right now. This is a modern version of something. This is something that was developed probably for this region. Okay, and that did happen over time, right? But that's not the template. This is not the template. All right, this is not this is not the grain. Now, the guy in the video before this is basing his observation locally. And even doing that, he is coming within 4 days of the actual Shavuot, folks. To me, that is remarkable. Okay, keep that in mind.
Grows a little shorter in the field versus the Rouge de Bordeaux field that is in a previous video. We're also growing a field of Rouge de Bordeaux this year, a field of Coruscant, which is a 5,000-year-old grain, and this hard red spring. With this particular grain, we're building Proof bread flour. It's a base flour that can be used to make bread on its own. It can be blended with heritage grains to make exceptional, one-of-a-kind bread, which is our country sourdough. I would say, like, it's nothing short of exceptional, one-of-a-kind, in the sense that it's
Just a side note, the heritage that he's talking about, those grains for those people who can't eat bread because they're gluten intolerant and that kind of thing, it's because of the GMO grains of the bread that you eat. If you eat these kinds of bread, you have a different reaction. I would research that a little more and consult a doctor. I'm not a medical I'm not a medical person, so I can give it. But I'm telling you, the chemistry between the plant and the person, ancient grains don't generally have a problems with the bread with people. Yeah, you read between the lines. I don't want to get myself in trouble with YouTube. That's a fine line. Anyway,
a bunch of old grains mixed together in our own recipe, made with a base of this hard red spring. We learned how to mill this on a traditional stone mill and make it into a flour that just on its own is usable. We take this Arizona grain and actually add some water to it before we run it to the mill. It's called tempering. It's a age-old traditional milling practice, but it's, again, not really practiced as much today anymore because it takes extra effort. But we're able to, through the tempering process, make it easier for our mill to strip away the outer part of the wheat berry and get to that center that is a little finer, more starchy. By tempering the grain before it runs through the mill, it basically takes away that outer layer in one big piece. We get a nice flaky bran. And as a result, we have a really clean flour that we can offer you and we can put at the base of our recipes. This is how we're able to use that ancient technology of just two stones atop of one another, as opposed to the modern steel industrial mill. Every time I'm in a field like this, I just think about...
I just want to say, if you ever come across someone like this locally, support people like this. And this is why I'm using this guy's video. Not only am I subscribed to his channel, I'm using his content here to prove a point, teaching. I love to use things as a teaching opportunity. This guy's trying to give you something wholesome, and he's got a mission. And what he's doing is going back to the ancient way. All right. And he's proven my point in doing so. So if you want to eat healthy, you want to be able to eat bread, and you're not able to eat bread, consider the ancient grains. Okay.
How at some point our ancestors stumbled upon a grass and decided that they would turn it into food, and how the grasses can feed the world. I was once at a baker's conference, and there was this professor that got up and gave a talk. The talk was why women stopped baking at home and why it matters. At first I thought, well, probably this talk's not going to be that relevant to me. I'm not a woman and I don't bake at, well, actually I was baking at home at the time, but not in the same way that was meant, you know, in the seminar. I was baking for a living for the community. I think, like, I thought the seminar meant like just baking for yourself, so maybe it wouldn't be something I could relate to. But then this professor launches into this whole history of ancient Egypt and how women used to basically power society through baking bread at home, in the sense that 50% of the calories in ancient Egypt came from sourdough bread. I thought that was wild because we all today associate bread as something as bad for you, but yet bread has brought Western society to where it is today. So what changed in bread making that...
You should ask yourself that right now. And by the way, I pointed out, I can't name the companies. I mean, I might get sued if I name the companies, but I've indirectly worked under them in the agriculture industry, especially in the cotton industry. But they are the reasons why. The ancient grains is good. And listen, the Mediterranean diet with these grains and with the fish from the Mediterranean and the olives and the pomegranates, it's called a blue zone. Those people live for a long time because of that, right? So think about the food adulteration. This is very important, folks.
Took it from the staple food to something that we try to stay away from. Well, the wheat, the fermentation, the process, we've gotten away from our roots in all of it. Women used to gather on their flat roofs in ancient Egypt in community and thresh the wheat to separate the stalk from these kernels, which are the actual seeds. So the first step of the process is just cleaning the grain. And once you get down to the seed, you can take it and with a stone grind it into a powder of flour. And that was the next step of the process. So when the community work of threshing wheat in the wind on a flat rooftop was over, the next part of the process was taking all these seeds and grinding them up into fresh flour. The part after that was to take a little bit of yesterday's dough and mix it with the freshly milled flour and water and a touch of salt for flavor. That's a sourdough process. Yesterday's dough fermented, now hungry for more food because, the microbes in that dough were actively feeding on the dough, eventually breaking down.
And that's important to point out, the microbes in the bread. So it's a living bread, not like bleached wheat or excuse me, bleached bread or white bread you get for sandwiches now in the grocery store. That's not the bread from the Bible, folks. This is a living organism. So it reacts to your gut chemistry. Yada yada yada. I'm not going to get into a science rant here, but going back to the biblical way is the point. Okay.
Down the dough itself and running out of food. So now when you mix a new dough with fresh flour, you're giving those microbes fresh food. They in turn are doing something for you that is lost in modern bread baking entirely, and that's they're pre-digesting this field of wheat, because it turns out, plants have defense mechanisms. So this plant in the field doesn't want to be consumed before it's done its work of reproducing. And so in the case of wheat, there's lectins, there's phytates, they're present in the wheat itself. Turns out fermentation helps neutralize those things. So the way that those women in ancient Egypt were baking, it's interesting. It's exactly what we're doing at Proof. We are here in this field. This wheat is going to be harvested in a couple months. We're going to run it through a stone flour mill between just two.
By that point, it will be golden, folks. It will not look green like this. All right. Incidentally, the rabbis in the Talmud, this is what they're dealing with when they're trying to make bread for Shavuot. So the ones that try to use the wheat to make bread, mind you, the other ones, the Mizrahi and some of the Sephardic, leaned more toward what was actually golden, which was barley. You can see the condition is you can't make wheat flour, fine flour, out of grains that look like this. It's not going to be the best. And what their solution was to cut it green and lay it out in the sun and let it turn brown in the sun. Well, that's like buying, fruits and vegetables that are harvested green, and then you buy it later at the grocery store when it's not its best. Is the point.
2 granite stones and make a freshly milled flour. And the next day, after the flour is milled, it's going to be mixed into a dough. And that dough is going to have a part of our sourdough starter from yesterday's bread. And in that way, we're carrying around a 14,000-year tradition of bread making that is all too rare. And that's really where I want to sort of close this experience of being in this serene wheat field. What we're doing is not the norm, and
He's right.
it ought
It's
to
a
be
lost art.
protected. It's
It
not
needs to be
easy.
protected.
It's a big
Absolutely.
investment. The last time we did a video like this was 2 years ago, and it was in a different part of town in the East Valley with a different set of farmers growing for us. It was interesting. At the edge of the video, you could see all kinds of warehouses in the distance going up. That doesn't seem to be the case at this part of town. It seems like we're mostly surrounded by farmland and farmhouses. But
I do want to point out that this location, which is Arizona, if you draw a straight line east, you will go into the areas of Israel that grow wheat. Okay.
what's happening to agriculture in the valley is it's being developed. So if we wish to grow food in our community, we also have to reckon with the idea that farmers have to be able to make a living. So the reason that we are working in a great exchange with this particular farm, Desert Sonoran, I'm wearing their hat today, is because if we don't buy this grain, then likely Matt would have to sell grain at a commercial level on the commodity market without the ability to get even the price that it costs to grow it. Because here in Arizona, we can't just rely on Mother Nature to come with the right rainstorms to grow this wheat. While it doesn't require too much water, it does require an input of water here. And so when we buy grain from here, it does cost us more than if we buy grain from further away. But that's only because of the way that this world works economically, where we don't pay our fair share for energy. Meaning, it costs a lot of ancient energy in the form of fossil fuels to bring wheat from North Dakota all the way to Arizona. We don't all bear that cost of producing that energy, which took millions of years to produce. We actually pay just the cost of the refinement of that energy into the fuels that we make. When Proof grows grain in our city, the amount of energy to bring it to the mill is far less than when we buy grain from far away and bring it home. You know, we're entering a world that seems to be deglobalizing. Things that we took for granted for decades and decades over the past century don't seem to be
All right. So you guys, he gets into, he's kind of rambling on some things I don't necessarily agree with. The point is the cycle of the grain there and what he's doing, even though that is not the specific grain that we're talking about. That's not even the emmer wheat that we're talking about, but it does serve a purpose in
as true.
proving my point. Even with that type of grain, it's definitely not ready right now, you guys. You can't make bread out of that. Again, that's Proof Bread channel. Please go and subscribe. Those guys are, you know, they're keeping that kind of thing alive. He's right. It's a dying, with modernization, it's a dying thing. So I want to go back to Israel to kind of finish up because he says a few more things that are profound. He is making his observation very local. And so the grain that he's looking at and he's considering it looks like that right now in Southern California. That's it. So that's probably a good segue to conclude this with Israel.
In the California area, I look, oh, when does the California area begin the harvest? So this year I was given the date, May 29th. May 29th is when the harvest is going to begin in California County. So that's a Friday. I'm going to begin counting on Sunday, May 31st. All right. So
he's going to count 7 weeks, right? So he's assuming that the wheat harvest starts at the 50-day point. And that's what we're putting sickle to the grain. No, that's the barley. Again, we don't count we're not starting the harvest because the wheat's not going to look like that, brother. Maybe the wheat that you're looking at is going to be a modified version for that region. It needs to be something more heritage that you're looking at. So you're looking at something that's going to be harvested more around July. That's going to be ready for harvest. They don't harvest it green, Israel. Okay, so it's not green when they start. And I'm saying that because he's getting this from Talmudic tradition, even though he's not saying that from here. The rabbis did argue this in medieval times, like I just told you, where they couldn't decide what grain was going to be harvested at that 50.4, the offering. And it morphed from there, folks, where they don't even wave bread anymore. We got to the place of cheesecake as he's established, okay? So it's very disconnected from the agriculture. Anyway.
I'm not going to begin counting on Friday because I have to begin counting on the day after the Sabbath from when the harvest ends. So if I begin counting on May 31st, I count 7 Sabbaths. The day after the 7th Sabbath is going to be July 19th. And so July 19th, I will be celebrating Shavuot. Now, again, if you live in a different country.
Now, with that calculation, folks, because Shavuot is actually right there at new moon. So it's like 14th or the 15th, somewhere around there. Whenever it's the dark moon going into the crescent, that 24-hour period there is Shavuot.
Climate or a different region and things are different where you are, I would recommend just actually contacting your Department of Agriculture or doing your own research for your region and celebrate it on your own time. Again, like we are a dispersed people, we are an exiled people. The Jews who want to pretend like they have all this unity are actually just fighting with each other all day long. You owe this to God. By you celebrating the day of the harvest, you are celebrating God's blessings to you. This is a personal thing. All right. So, you don't need to actually go and join yourself with some random community that doesn't even know like how to actually read the Torah and is literally just making so many things up that it's hard to imagine how the rabbis took their version of Shavuot out of the Torah. It's literally not there. It's not there at all. So yeah, just do your best to actually celebrate this harvest. And I told you how I do it, and I recommend that you do what you can based off of where you live in the world. And remember, the reason why it's wheat is the staple. It's the staple of our diet. At the end of the day, barley is not the staple of our diet. Neither is fruits and vegetables. It's the bread, right? The bread is that which we need to live ultimately. That's always been the staple of the human diet. It's always been the way for us to actually have basic sustenance. And that is what we're celebrating here. We're celebrating the basic sustenance that God has given us, and we're enjoying the life that he's given us. We're celebrating. Someone asked, who is the sojourner? The sojourner is anyone that lives among you. Anyone that lives among you who may not be a native to the land, who may not have the ancestral connections that you have, the family net that you have, and the generational wealth. There's someone that has just moved in, someone that's kind of just lives around you, but doesn't have the support system that you have. You help them. You help the sojourner. You help the poor. You help the widow. You help the orphan. You help the Levite. The Levite's the priest class. They're not, they don't even own land. They don't have an actual the tribe of Levi doesn't have an actual inheritance in the land, right? So they're relying on the people to support them through the gifts and the tithes. And so you are helping the people that need help, and you are rejoicing with the blessings that God has given you. And so that's awesome. It's really an awesome thing to be part of. And seeing here, someone saying Yom Kippur is technically not a specified date. Well, it is. It's the 10th day of the 7th month. So my point is that every holiday in the Torah has a date. Passover is on the 15th day of the first month, or rather the 14th in the evening. The Day of Remembrance is the first day of the 7th month. The Day of Atonement is the 10th day of the 7th month, and the 9th in the evening. And Sukkot is the 15th day of the 7th month. Those all have specified dates. Shavuot does not have a set date. So I'm saying I'm not even sure that MS is that Minnesota, Massachusetts. Sorry, I'm not that good with the states, but yeah, you're saying that you're not sure if they grow wheat in your state. Again, just go to the next state over, the closest place that's growing wheat to you. Again, you're not going to have this like perfectly calculated thing. Again, we don't have a priest, we don't have an Omer. It's almost to Mississippi. Thank you. It's almost to a point irrelevant in terms of how we can even calculate it, because we don't even have a priest to do to mark the beginning of the harvest. So what we celebrate is the harvest, and we do our best based off of the resources that we have. And the main point is that we get the count straight, because again, counting from the day after Passover till the day after the 7th Wednesday is not the day after the 7th Sabbath. All right. And again, as I mentioned, even the Karaite understanding that says, oh, let's use the first Shabbat after Passover, after unleavened breads. No, like, where do you see Passover? Where do you see that Shavuot must be connected to Passover? I don't see that anywhere in the text. I don't know where people got that from. Everything about the text tells us that Shavuot begins at the beginning of the harvest. And the beginning of the harvest actually is not right after Passover. The beginning of the wheat harvest is going to be later. Aviv is the barley. Aviv is the springtime, the early spring equinox. That's when Passover is. But the wheat is not even ripe then. It's, again, by the Torah standard, it was hardly even growing at the time of Aviv, at the time of the early spring. So the wheat harvest is going to be more around now, beginning. And so, as I mentioned, in my area, it's beginning on May 29th. So I'll be
only by modern standards. He may have some wheat, some what's called winter red wheat, which is a modern version of wheat. It will be starting to come into golden color right now, but that is a modern version of it. So he's doing a local observation. I want to point that out. We're not talking about Emmer in his area. Obviously, he needs to be looking for heritage wheat when he does that.
Starting to count on May 31st, which is the first Sunday after the harvest begins, the day after the Sabbath. I will count 7 Sabbaths until the day after the 7th Sabbath, and that comes out to July 19th this year. Again, it's not going to be the same every year, and that is okay. That is baked into the cake of the nature of Shavuot being the only holiday without a date. So that's awesome. Someone said the truth is very simple, but internationally covered with complication. Yeah, I would agree. There's a lot of complication.
All right, so we're not looking at what they're doing in Ukraine, or what they're doing in Ontario, Canada, or what they're doing in any place other than the template given to us in the Torah, and with the specific grains, which they still grow in the region. By the way, it's all the way from Egypt, all the way through Israel into Turkey. They still grow the same type. And there may be some modifications in other varieties that farmers started growing, but you can find heritage grains that are growing.
Covering up the truth. And someone saying, it seems like the first rabbi ever made some mistake, and the succeeding rabbi spent eternity rearranging everything to cover for it. Exactly. They're just covering their tracks at this point. And this is just very unfortunate, because like, how do you actually measure that, right? That's not okay. Like, you don't get to just cover the mistakes of your buddies. We're all bound to the Torah here. If we want to ever understand what it means to be a people, we need to return to our Constitution, to our foundation. And again, our Constitution is not just like, oh, the Constitution of the United States. This is the Constitution written by God. These are the festivals of Yahweh. We don't get to determine those things. Yahweh determines those things. Someone says, we do not count from the weekly Sabbath within matzah. We start the Sunday after the next Sabbath. We eat no grain for 4 days. Yeah, so again, some people start within the Sabbath. Some people start on the day after the first day of Passover. Some people start on the day after the first Shabbat.
Again, he's doing this on a Gregorian. Even the ones that are making the argument in his chat are doing this on a Gregorian fixed day calendar, and not the actual biblical agricultural calendar given with the specific days. If you do the math, the days of Shabbat are given. It's the same every month. When you calculate the new moon, it's the same every month. 8, 15, 22, 29. Every time the Sabbath is mentioned in the scriptures, it's going to be one of those days. For the exception of Yom Kippur, which is the 10th day. And also the 2 additional days of Sabbath that are added to the weekly, the 15th day. You see this in Esther, where you got 2 additional days that are added to, so you got 3 days in a row that are technically Sabbath. That's only in Esther, all right? But it's clearly a lunar solar pattern.
Within Passover, some people start on the day after the Shabbat, the first Shabbat after Passover, after the leavened breads. Look, I perfectly understand. Different people have different understandings here. There are people that I love and respect who do this differently than I do it. I'm just providing my understanding that I believe I have gathered directly from the text of the Torah. I'm not using an external text. I'm not using any other understanding other than what's written here. And for people that are trying to get to a date, to a specific date, they definitely don't like this reading. But again, I don't see that as the most important things. I see it as ultimately this is about receiving God's inspiration, and God is telling us, I'm creating a festival of the harvest, and the harvest by definition is not based off of a specific date. So that's good.
This is very similar to where I was, you guys, when I first started figuring this out. I didn't know the nuances and the details, especially the connection to the grain, completely. But when I started digging into it, I was very much like this. I was trying to take what was known and fit it into a puzzle that really didn't fit, and reconcile what I was understanding at the same time. And in my mind, it fit. But then when I started fine tuning it, then I started questioning myself. I was like, wait a minute, what is going on here? There's something wrong. There's something not right about this pattern. There's something that's out of sync. And I was right. Eventually, I've discovered I was right. But he's right at that brink right now, where he's just discovering that, first of all, the rabbis are BSing with some stuff. This has got a connection to agriculture. The agriculture is not even mentioned. We're doing cheesecakes, yada, yada, yada. He's figuring all that. I was right there, just like this guy. And so y'all used him to encourage me in this. And so I went and looked at several of his videos. He's not a believer in Yeshua as a Messiah, but he has had people on his channel that come from where he has come from, that see Yeshua. My connection to him is the agriculture, specifically on this day here, to where we just kind of come from different places and then we cross paths. That's a divine appointment, you guys. And so I want you to pray for this young man. I also would like to try to figure out a way to have a conversation with him, and maybe just kind of compare notes and show him what Yah has revealed to me, and then hopefully more lights will come on for him about these days and in the explicit connection to the grains. Again, I have told you over and over again, Yah has preserved his truth in the grains, the secret of the wheat, the truth in the wheat fields, the wisdom in the wheat fields, and the grains. It's preserved there. So somewhat of a refreshing. It doesn't pay the groceries bill. It doesn't do anything, but Yah did kind of refresh me in a sense. Though I'm in a dry season, He hasn't abandoned me. Um, this, and even though the people that are watching this and it's not going viral, and people are going, oh wow, right, and there's not this revolution to see this show. I think it will go down in history that I was one of the first to point you guys in this direction. And hopefully at some point people will see all of these videos and start to put it all together. Hopefully it's the Holy Spirit speaks to them and reveals this, and then they start researching and then discover these videos, and I become a confirmation in what they're already pursuing. Because I've discovered that it's very difficult to present this information to people that have been indoctrinated and they believe a certain way, because the first thing that happens, their eyes are glassed over, it goes right over their head, and they're just it's like Charlie Brown at that point. And what I mean by that is womp 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 womp. Remember with in the Charlie Brown where the kids listen to the adults who are the wise ones, and anytime they're speaking, it's womp 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 womp. I'm not saying that I'm the wise one, but it seems like that to me when I'm trying to teach these concepts to people, and especially a brother that I love. His name's Kevin, and he is very zealous in some places, and he loves the codes when they confirm what he wants them to confirm. But when I try to bring this kind of truth to him, it's like that. It's like he's got there's a deficit between the communication, and he's just not getting it. And I just want to grab him by the neck and just want to shake him, but I can't do that, right? Anyway, I pray for him. Hopefully, hopefully he will get confirmation by triangulation, and I mean that specifically in a certain way. And when it happens, I'll point it out. It's got a lot to do with Rabbi Jacob, I'm sure. Shalom to you guys. Thank you for watching this and allowing me to just continue down this rabbit hole and show you I'm not the only one calling out the BS from some of the things that have been recorded in history and observed and indoctrinated in us. It just does not line up to the patterns. And yeah, I hope you can see that. Shalom. We'll see you in the next video.